Book 3, Chapter 11 of the Cinema Murder. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Calm Dragon. The Cinema Murder by E. Phillips Oppenheim. Book 3, Chapter 11. Philip was awakened the next morning by the insistent ringing of the telephone at his elbow. He took up the receiver, conscious of a sharp pain in his left shoulder as he moved. "Is this Mr. Merton Ware?" a man's smooth voice inquired. "Yes." "I am speaking for Mr. Sylvanus Power. Mr. Sylvanus Power regrets very much that he is unable to lunch with Mr. Ware as arranged today, but he is compelled to go to Philadelphia on the morning train. He will be glad to meet Mr. Ware anywhere, a week today, and know the result of the matter which was discussed last night." "To whom am I speaking?" Philip demanded. "I don't know anything about lunching with Mr. Power today." "I am Mr. Power's secretary, George Lunt," was the reply. "Mr. Power's message is very clear. He wishes you to know that he will not be in New York until a week today." "How is Mr. Power?" Philip inquired. "He met with a slight accident last night," the voice continued, "and is obliged to wear his arm in a sling. Except for that, he is quite well. He has already left for Philadelphia by the early train. He was anxious that you should know this." "Thank you very much," Philip murmured, a little dazed. He sprang out of bed, dressed, quickly hurried over his coffee and rolls, boarded a cross-town car, and arrived at the Monmouth House flats just in time to meet Martha Grimes issuing into the street. She was not at all the same Martha. She was very neatly dressed. Her shoes were nicely polished, her clothes were well brushed, her gloves new. She wore a bunch of fresh-looking violets in her waistband. She startled in surprise as Philip accosted her. "Whatever are you doing back in the slums?" she demanded. "Any fresh trouble?" "Nothing particular," Philip replied, turning round and falling into step with her. "I can't see my way, that's all. I want to talk to you. You're the most human person I know. You understand Elizabeth." "Gee," she smiled. "This is the Lion and the Mouse, with a vengeance. You can walk with me if you like as far as the block before the theater. I'm not going to arrive there with you. I tell you so straight." "No followers, eh? There's no reason to set people talking," she declared. "Their tongues wag fast enough at the theater as it is. I've only been there for one day's work, and it seems to me I've heard the inside history of everyone connected with the place." "That makes what I have to say easier," he remarked. "Just what do they say about Miss Dalstan and Mr. Sylvanus Power?" She looked at him indignantly. "If you think you're going to worm things out of me—" "Don't be foolish," he interrupted a little wearily. "How could you know anything? You are only the echo of 1,000 voices. I could find out if I went where they gossip. I don't. In effect, I don't care. But I am up against a queer situation. I want to know just what people think of them. Afterwards I'll tell you the truth." "Well, they profess to think," she said slowly, "that the theater belongs to Miss Dalstan, and that she—" "Stop, please," he interrupted. "I know you hate saying it, and I know quite well what you mean. Well, what about that?" "It isn't my affair." "It isn't true," he told her. "Whether it's true or not, she is one of the best women in the world," Martha declared vigorously. "There isn't any doubt about that either," he assented. "This is the situation. Listen. Sylvanus Power has been in love with Elizabeth for the best part of his life. He built that theater for her and offered it, at a price. She accepted his terms. When the time came for payment, he saw her flinch. He went away again, and has just come back. She is face to face now with a decision to which she is partly committed. In the meantime, during these last few months, Elizabeth and I have become great friends. You know that I care for her. I think that she cares for me. She has to make up her mind." "Martha, which is she to choose?" "How do you want me to answer that?" the girl asked, slackening her pace a little. "I'm not Miss Dalstan." "From her point of view," he explained eagerly, "this man Power is madly, and I believe truly, in love with her. In his way he is great. In his way, too, he is a potentate, and he can give her more than luxury, more even than success. You know Elizabeth," he went on. "She is one of the finest women who ever breathed, an idealist, but a seeker after big things. She deserves big things, Is she more likely to find them with me or with him? Power's wife is still alive, she ruminated. And won't accept a divorce at present, he observed. If ever she does, of course he will marry her. That has to be taken into account, not morally, but the temporal side of it. We know perfectly well that whatever Elizabeth decides, she couldn't possibly do wrong. Martha smiled a little grimly. That's what it is to be born in the clouds, she said. There is no sin for a good woman. He looked at her appreciatively. I wonder how I knew that you would understand this, he sighed. Suddenly he clutched at her arm. She glanced up in surprise. He was staring at a passer-by. Her eyes followed his. In a neat morning suit, with a black bowler hat and well-polished shoes, a cigar in his mouth and a general air of prosperity, Mr. Edward Dane was strolling along Broadway. He passed without a glance at either of them. For a moment Philip faltered. Then he set his teeth and walked on. There was an ashen shade in his face. The girl looked at him and shook her head. Mr. Ware, she said, we haven't talked much about it, but there is something there behind, isn't there? Something you are terrified about. Something that might come, even now. She knows about it, he interposed quickly. Would it be very bad if it came? Hideous! If she were your wife, she would be notorious. It would ruin her. Do you think, then, she asked quietly, that you needed to come and ask my advice? He walked on with his head high, looking upwards with unseeing eyes. A little vista of that undisturbed supper-table on the other side of this marble hall, a dim perspective of those 8 years of waiting, flitted through his brain. The lord of that Fifth Avenue mansion was in earnest, right enough, and he had so much to offer. It will break me if I have to give her up, he said simply. I believe I should have gone overboard, crossing the Atlantic, but for her. There are some women, she sighed, the best of all women, the joy of whose life seems to be sacrifice. That sounds queer, don't it? But it's true. They're happy in misfortune, so long as they are helping someone else. She is wonderful. Elizabeth Dalstan. She may even be one of those. You'll find that out. You'd better find out for yourself. There isn't anyone can help you very much. I'm not sure that you haven't, he said. Now I'll go. Where did you get your violets, Martha? Had them in water since last night, haven't you? She made a little grimace at him. A very polite young gentleman at the box office sent us each a bunch directly we started work yesterday. I've only had a few words with him yet, but Eva, that's the other girl, she's plagued to death with fellows already. So I'm going to take him out one evening. Philip stopped short. They were approaching the theater. Not a step further, he declared solemnly. I wouldn't spoil your prospects for worlds. Run along, my little cynic, and warm your hands. Life's good at your age. Better than when I found you, eh? You don't think I'm ungrateful? She asked, a little wistfully. He shook his head. You couldn't be that, Martha. Good luck to you. She turned away, with a little farewell wave of the hand, and was lost at once in the surging stream of people. Philip summoned a taxicab, sat far back in the corner, and drove to his rooms. He hesitated for a moment before getting out, crossed the pavement quickly, hurried into the lift, and, arriving upstairs, let down the latch of the outside door. Edward Dane was back in New York. For a moment the memory of the great human drama in which he found himself a somewhat pathetic figure seemed swallowed up by this sudden resurrection of a grisly tragedy. He looked around his room, a little helplessly, against his will. That hideous vision which had loomed up before him in so many moments of desperation was slowly reforming itself, this time not in the still watches of the night, but in the broad of daylight, with the spring sunshine to cheer his heart, the roar of a friendly city in his ears. It was no time for dreams, this, and yet he felt the misery sweeping in upon him, felt all the cold shivers of his ineffective struggles. Slowly that fateful panorama unfolded itself before his memory. He saw himself step out with a glad relief from the uncomfortable, nauseous third-class carriage, and clutching his humble little present in his hand, cross the flinty platform, climb the long, rain-swept hill, keeping his head upraised, though the very sky seemed grimy, battling against the miserable depression of that everlasting ugliness. Before him, at least, there was one companion. There would be